domestic violence has been swept under the rug and hidden from view. But in the same year that Rosie Batty was acknowledged as Australian of the Year in 2015, author Sofie Laguna was awarded the Miles Franklin Prize for her novel, The Eye of the Sheep. This story is told through the eyes of young Jimmy Flick and his mum, Paula, who are the victims of Gavin's drunken outbursts. Set in Melbourne suburbs in the 1970s, Jimmy is a special needs child, and the only person who truly understands and values him is his mum. Through Jimmy's attempts navigating abuse and subsequent attempts at rekindling his relationship with his dad, we are reminded of the inescapable pain suffered by domestic violence victims, viewed through the observative and perceptive lens of a child. This is The Eye of the Sheep by Sofie Laguna. 3 weeks after the holiday, Dad came home and said some blokes were going to be laid off because of low productivity. When he spoke, I heard all the days of rust caught in his vocals. They could have given us bloody notice. I've been there for years. Mum crossed the kitchen towards him. But it won't be you, love. Maybe some of the other men who are near retirement. Some of the older boys, but not you. Dad shrugged and moved away, opening the fridge door and pulling out the comfort of his familiar beer. He cracked the top and tipped it over his open mouth. If Dad was made of glass, you would have seen the beer rushing through his network. Beer through the tunnels of his legs, to his toes, along his arms, all the way to his fingertips, until every part of him was drowned. What would happen at the refinery tomorrow would be flooded. The next day, Dad came home and told Mum that he'd been fired. No bloody loyalty, he said. I'm a $sign and that's it. When he crossed the yard to go into his shed, I saw that the water was gone from his body. Smoke drifted from his chest. He was dried up like a desert. Mum made me sit in the sewing room, but when she left to answer the telephone, I went out into the yard. I turned an empty plant bucket upside down and put it underneath Dad's high shed window. Then I stood on it. Dad was staring into his open fridge. He was the center, and the light from the fridge came out in rays around him. All the rest of the shed was in shadow. He slammed his fists onto the workbench and exploded with bad words Mum said I could never say. I gripped the ledge tightly, the bucket shaky beneath my feet. Suddenly, he swung around and saw me through the dusty glass. Though our vision was obstructed by dirt and cobweb and stain, his eyes held me suspended. I wanted to call out, but my throat wouldn't release the sounds. When at last he turned away, shaking his head as if he could refuse me, I jumped off the bucket and ran inside. Later, I saw him coming up to the house. Just before dinner, when I walked past the sitting room, I saw the dark of my dad's head in his black recliner, bobbing up and down to the stereo playing Merle, who sang "The Fight Inside of Me." I saw his hand pour beer into his throat. The table in front of him was full of empty bottles. His ashtray was on the ground beside the recliner. It overflowed with butts. I went into the kitchen where Mum was making dinner. She put chops, carrots, green beans, and potato on a plate with a white roll on the side and carried it into Dad. She knew that after he ate, he wasn't as drunk. Food particles battled the beer and food, and due to the heaviness, always won. I heard Dad shouting from the sitting room, "What the hell would you know about it?" My heart beat faster. My hands kept getting in each other's way, knocking against each other. The saxa fell from the table, leaving a spill of salt across the floor. "You and that bloody kid who drives me to it, you both do. Leave me alone." I got up from the table and walked to the sitting room. The dinner Mum had brought for Dad was on the floor. Beans made a path across the carpet that led to Mum and Dad, where they stood facing each other. Why was my mother in there? She knew not to stay when Dad was drinking. "You leave him out of this. It's not his fault you lost your job." Her face was red. There was chopped gravy on her dress. Her hair flew round her face as if it was electric. Dad stepped towards her. "If he'd been normal, we could have moved to Albany. I could have got the job on the rigs." "Oh, the bloody job on the rigs. Bloody Albany. You tried to get the job on the rigs and they said you weren't big enough for some rubbish. It had nothing to do with our son." Her voice exploded from her. I clung to the door frame and watched sparks shoot from her mouth. "Our son," Dad shouted. "Who's not my bloody son? You must have done some other poor bastard to get a son like that." Mum made the sound of an animal trying to escape. Then she came at him with the full strength of her body, with her arms that hung the washing and swept and vacuumed, with her legs that pushed the trolley of cans and packets all the way up the hill every Saturday, with her stomach where she put her dinners, and with the weight of her bottom that made a chair for her to sit on after another day done. Her hair now bright with currents that flicked into the air above, she pushed herself into him and he fell back against the coffee table. "Stupid bloody woman." Dad dragged a low growl up from under the carpet beneath his feet, pulling it past the fibres and giving it hard to my mother. He shoved her in the chest. I wished she was wearing a jacket made of knives and guns, all the knives tied together and the guns aimed and ready. I wished she was wearing it under her dress, but she wasn't. All she had was the bra and the cream petticoat I'd seen her put on that morning before she pulled her stripe and dot dress over her head. Mum screamed, and Dad hit her in the eyes. He was blinding her. He was blinding my mum. Who would see me if not her? The sparks that shot from Mum's mouth ignited a trail that snaked across the carpet and set my feet alight. I ran with an unstoppable force into the room and hit Dad in the legs. He felt hard under my fists, as if there were metal fillings beneath the skin. I hit him in the stomach. Then he hit me back. Dad had never hit me before. It was only ever Mum. I felt the bones of my chest splinter from the weight of his hand. He grabbed my arm and pulled it and snapped it like a matchstick. I swung at him with my other arm. "No, Dad, no! I shouted. And then he shoved me hard against the wall. Merle Haggard sang, "That's the way love goes," as I fell. I looked up and saw brown beer bottles filled with light as if a candle was burning inside each one. The carpet was wet with the ocean that flooded out of me. Through the glass, I saw Mum catch fire. Flames leapt from her body. She whipped at Dad with her burning branches until he was crushed against the wall, hands over his face to protect himself from the heat. He dropped into his chair and let her burn him. When she'd run out of fuel, Mum fell to her knees beside me, looking up at my dad. "Our boy, Kevin. Our boy. Our son." In her voice was the memory of a time when I belonged to both of them, neither his nor hers. Their shared boy. Dad heard it too, but he couldn't look.